Hallo Sven, das Timo nochmal. Wir machen noch gerade einen Kopfhörertest. Können wir mal den Englisch-Kanal testen, bitte?
Dies wäre der englische Kanal.
Wir müssen noch die Kabel auseinanderpulen. Ready. Ist da? Sag's Bescheid, ja, oder? What do you think?
Spoke to Jim, huh? So heavy.
So, dies wäre der englische Kanal. Ich weiß nicht, ob Sie mich hören können. Dies ist der... Ich spreche bereits seit einer Minute auf dem englischen Kanal. Dies ist der englische Kanal. Können Sie mich hören? This is the English channel. Can anybody hear me? This is the English channel.
German Channel? Ein kleinen Moment, ja. Danke. Mich hören.
We ask for your understanding for the delay, but the previous billet of the foreign minister took a little longer. We now open the first press conference of the German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock at the COP28. Good afternoon. I am pleased to note that with an eye to the beginning of the second week where the foreign ministers are joining in to strengthen and enhance the effectiveness of the EU team, I have been able to come here. I'm pleased to be able to be here. The German team has not only done a tremendous job in the first week, and I'd like to thank Jennifer Morgan, but also the whole team for their contributions. Also with regard to the Loss and Damage Fund, which we operationalized with the support of Germany and others, right at the beginning of the negotiations. I have arrived here with the strategy on climate foreign policy in my baggage, and I think we can take pride in that strategy justifiably. It is not only a strategy focusing on climate and the environment, but it is also an economic, innovative strategy, as is demonstrated by the German Pavilion and the German motto, which goes ambitious, just together. First, ambitious. What do we mean by that? If we want to keep 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach, we need to triple the expansion we have to triple renewable energies and to double energy efficiency. And these two objectives are very important to us. I and the Sultan of the UAE made that suggestion at the Petersburg Climate Dialogue. Other countries have joined. We have 120 countries that have signed up to it by now. But expanding renewables and enhancing energy efficiency in itself are not enough if we want to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach. What we need in order to be successful to achieve this goal is that we phase out fossil fuels. And I want to be very clear in that regard. Phasing out fossil fuels, not phasing out fossil emissions. It does make a difference, quite a substantial difference, although it is only one word that distinguishes the two expressions. And undoubtedly, there's no other subject that is as heatedly debated at this conference, because here at the COP2, we hear loud voices, powerful voices of the old fossil world.
We are thankful that there is an ambitious group that pursues the goal of tripling renewables, doubling energy efficiency, and phasing out fossil fuels. And phasing out fossil fuels is something different than phasing out emissions, which is not a solution.
This is not a solution to focus exclusively on emissions, because the expansion of renewables in itself and also doubling energy efficiency in itself is not sufficient for us to make it back onto the track to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Expanding renewables when compared to reducing the use of fossil fuels, if we pursue this path in the right way, it will be the most just and most economically advisable path to pursue. 8 years ago, at the time of the Paris Agreement, investing in a wind turbine still constituted a risk. Today, it makes sense in economic terms, which is to say that those who continue to focus on fossil fuels or encourage third countries to enter the fossil world run the risk of ending up with stranded investments. Therefore, a whole host of countries, not only Germany, but also Kenya, Uruguay, and an oil-producing country like the UAE, have massively invested, therefore, in expanding the use of renewable energy. Second, just. There is a deep injustice inherent in the fact that states, small island states, or the countries of the Sahel, suffer so severely from floods and droughts, although they have only contributed to a very small extent to climate change, if at all. This makes it the question of global trust of the 21st century, climate justice, that is. These countries justifiably demand the support of the industrialized countries. Thus, the decision on operationalizing the Fund for Loss and Damage has always been a matter very important to me, dear to my heart, because I've always been aware that if we don't address the issue of climate justice, we, the industrialized countries, we won't get the trust on the part of those countries who over the past 2 decades did not enjoy the prosperity that we enjoyed, and we will not be able to accompany these countries onto the track towards 1.5 degrees. This illustrates how important it is to be willing to engage thoroughly and to make an enormous effort, even if the wind is blowing into your faces. I remember a couple of years ago when I was in Berlin in the main conference hall of the Foreign Office, and I said at the time, yes, we, Germany that is, want to put the Loss and Damage Fund on the agenda of the next COP, the COP in Egypt that would have been. Protest would be a mild term to describe the response that this triggered, even from partners that have been very close to us. But over the course of last year, we have made it very clear that this is more than just an instrument to create greater justice in the field of climate. But, and this makes it such an important issue, the fund is also important because it allows us to bid farewell and to overcome the old blocks that have dominated climate policy. And we have been successful in doing so here at the COP. Those have come together that are most affected by the impact of climate change, and those have come together that are most ambitious with regard to climate action. We are no longer 2 blocks, but we're working together. Last year, however, was not the moment for us to simply say yes to this fund, because at the time, the question of who would pay into that fund was hotly debated and a geopolitical issue. So we worked behind the scenes to prepare the ground for a fund that was in keeping with modern times and that would ensure that everyone, those that are economically strong, but also those who are more vulnerable, are being brought together, and that those who will benefit from the fund that are hardest hit. Therefore, I would like to thank the presidency of the COP28, the UAA, for working with us in Germany and allowing us to send the starting shot at this conference on the operationalization of the fund. It's an expression of global responsibility, and I would not be surprised to see other economically strong countries like Saudi Arabia and China, that by now has contributed to global warming like no other country, pay into that fund. And this brings me to my third point. We can only achieve this if we act together. In a globalized world, we can tackle the climate crisis only if all of us cooperate. We, the federal government, and this is also part and parcel of our strategy on climate foreign policy, have laid down quite clearly that we will tackle the transformation in cooperation with our partners from other countries and continents in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, that is. And we call it a path towards transformation because there is not the path of transformation. It is a path leading or bringing about a transformation. In Germany, too, we have come to realize that you have to support countries or partners to a different degree. It is therefore important that at this COP we demonstrate that those have come together that stand up for climate justice. As I said, the time of bloc thinking, here the G7, there the G77, is over for good, once and for all. Today we are forming alliances, bringing together the ambitious countries for both groups. We no longer speak of the G7 here and the G77, but the G stands for global, for acting together. those are there that have trust. That before today, the dividing line runs between those who have trust in the future and want to see change, and those who continue to stubbornly remain or hold on to the past, threatening their future. It is the Just Energy Transition Partnerships are genuine partnerships, and this is what we're aiming for in order to be able to bridge the rift between the various groups. We are supporting South Africa and Indonesia in the framework of the Just Energy Transition Partnerships, for example, helping them to accelerate the phasing out of fossil fuels and to do so in a way that creates new jobs, as we have done in parts of Germany, in areas like the Lausitz area, for example. Being the fourth largest economy, being as an industrialized country with a long fossil tradition, we are called upon to do our bit. At the same time, we have the opportunity to demonstrate that prosperity, industrial strength, and climate action are not mutually exclusive, but in the best case, in the best world, can support and complement each other. And it is in that spirit that we are engaging in the final phase of negotiations of COP28. We are speaking a clear language, are very ambitious, as I said. We have an open ear for the concerns and needs of the vulnerable countries, and we keep in mind their paths towards transformation and their ideas and thoughts. As I said, it is in that sense that we are entering this final phase. The majority of you were here before I came, have spent some time here already. It's been a COP where we had a bang at the beginning, a positive note at the beginning, and we do hope that we can bring about genuine change for the very first time since 2015, where we can generate a dynamic bringing together countries that no longer used to only cooperate within the old blocks. I perceive that as an enormous opportunity. I look forward to the negotiations of the next 2 days, but I'm also saying quite clearly that this COP takes place whilst the situation in the Mid-East is quite dramatic, which of course calls upon us to also give developments there our attention. And I'd like to just briefly comment on the situation in the Middle East. Whilst we are negotiating about the climate crisis here, a crisis that takes place mostly in silence and without missiles, the crisis in the Middle East continues. The missiles and rockets are being fired not that far away from us, and people in the Middle East are fearing for their lives. The people are very concerned about their relatives who continue to be held hostage by Hamas. Not even the International Committee of the Red Cross has access to these hostages, so it is hard to tell in what a situation these people find themselves. The people in Gaza, especially the children in Gaza, are undergoing a hellish experience. Humanitarian assets and assistance hardly reaches the people beyond the south of Gaza and do not get to the north at all. Missiles from Gaza, the terror of Hamas, missiles being leveled against school buildings, schools in which children are being taught, are being attacked. Attacks from the Houthis from Yemen, attacks against civilian ships in the Red Sea too. This is the way in which Israel is attacked. A demand, emotionally understandable, for a general ceasefire falls on empty ears because it does not give us any concrete idea about how we can end the terror of Hamas, how we can ensure that Hamas lays down its weapon, how we can ensure that Israel can live in safety and security again. And at the same time, things cannot continue as they stand. Israel has the right to defend itself in the framework of international law. However, no one can look away when we see thousands of children die or survive without their parents. We cannot accept a situation where people find it very hard to find a safe place. an area in which they enjoy protection. Right from the beginning, therefore, I was very clear in saying that the fight is directed against Hamas, not against the innocent Palestinians. We expect of Israel that it adapts its military actions in order to reduce the suffering of the civilian population. We expect of Israel that it allows more humanitarian assistance to get into Gaza, especially into the north of Gaza, that it works in a way that ensures that there are fewer civilian casualties. Far too many civilians have already become victims of the conflict in Gaza. The question how Israel wages its war, fights this war, is of central importance if one wants to keep alive a perspective for a political solution. The way in which one wages a war should open up a political option for ending that war. The war will not be won if you lose peace in the attempt to win the war. In order to avoid such a situation, all those who want to end the suffering on all sides have to cooperate, and those who are aware of the suffering of those concerned have to cooperate, have to build bridges. And this is why I've just had a lengthy discussion with the Foreign Minister of the UAE. We are closely coordinating with those moderate countries that have made an indispensable humanitarian contribution or have acted as mediators in this conflict. And we are working with all our strength to ensure that a political horizon remains open for a two-state solution. Humanitarian pauses, further humanitarian pauses are urgently required. Thank you very much. Now we have time for questions. I apologize for the noise that comes in from the neighboring pavilion. Please use the microphone when you put your questions to the minister. I think the colleagues would like to hear your question too. ARD television, more specifically regarding Gaza, what are the points you are negotiating, and have you been consulting your partners with regard to establishing safe areas? You made the point that most urgent thing is to ensure that humanitarian pauses are being allowed so as to allow humanitarian assistance to get into Gaza. They are in need for everything: food, water, fuel, medicine, especially in the north of Gaza. For days now, people have not been receiving any kind of assistance. And we've been working on this for weeks now. We need to open up more border crossings to allow the humanitarian assistance to get into Gaza. Yes, you made the point. People do have to have the chance, have to have the opportunity to find a safe space, somehow a safe haven. That is basically the foundation on which humanitarian international law is built, not theoretically creating protection, but making it sure or guaranteeing it in a practical way on the ground.
Politico. You spoke about alliances with ambitious countries. Do you think that the US should provide more support to the EU in fossil phase out? And how do you want to nudge Saudi Arabia and other oil-producing countries to phase out fossil fuels? I'm always happy to see the Americans working hand in hand with the Europeans, especially in the field of climate protection, of course, and with the Loss and Damage Fund, which was not met with great enthusiasm on the American side. We were able to show that we as Europeans can get things going. And this is why we make the case with all partners, but especially with our closest friends and partners, to move forward together and step up for the fossil fuel phase out. And I think it is important to also not have any false promises. If you speak about technologies that either don't exist yet or are unaffordable, it's not helpful. And it's not only a question of climate justice, it is also a question of fairness vis-a-vis other countries that you might tell, all right, you can stay longer in the fossil world, but you won't be able to pay for it. So For us, it is important to point out that if you exchange a word replacing fossil fuels by fossil emissions, you also need to be clear about what it means in concrete terms, and if technologies will only be available in 6 to 8 years' time. It is a promise for the far future, and we don't have this time at our hands. Otherwise, we will never keep 1.5 degrees within reach, and the same is true for our efforts with other countries in the world. We make the case for reaching agreement, and some of you had already been present 8 years ago in Paris, at the COP in Paris. And if you look at what's been done during these 8 years, I wasn't a minister yet, so I didn't have such press conferences, but I spoke about phasing out coal, and there was no applause at all. But more than that, many of the journalists would say I'm crazy to even imagine such a situation, such a phase out. And now we're talking about coal phase out globally, and it's no longer a controversial issue. The only issue is to see how we can support countries in doing this phase out. And despite the time that we've lost, we can truly see that if the world stands together and works together, we can reach so much. And as all countries have already agreed that the technologies of the future will be climate neutral ones, I think it is up to those countries like Saudi Arabia that see themselves as a global economic actor, that they not only pursue this path themselves, but also support others to do the same. Eva Knigge, Bayerischer Rundfunk, Deutschlandradio. You spoke about the loss and damage fund and that a non-classical contributor has contributed. You spoke about Saudi Arabia and China. You were hoping they would also contribute. How could you nudge them to do so? Well, I always have high hopes. So yes, absolutely. And I think we should not underestimate the situation. And for me, it's not only the special thing that we have this fund available, but that it has started in a way that nobody had expected. Not a fund where Europe says, okay, this is an important fund and please others should also contribute, but that the COP presidency and other countries as well made contributions over the last days, and they really understood that this fund is very much in their own interest, because geopolitics should not be underestimated at this COP. It is really present everywhere. We feel it everywhere. So financing and technology transfer are also extremely important. We always feel the question present, who is going to pay for the transformation? And we saw that some countries had paid on bilateral schemes in the past. But we have more vulnerable countries that might not fulfill the conditions posed by donor countries. And now we have a situation where these vulnerable countries can get back on their feet after suffering from climate damage, and can also develop freely in economic terms in the future without such a narrow framework. So I think it is important to see who will contribute. I think not everybody will have taken that decision tomorrow, but as it is a fund that is under the framework of the World Bank and not the UNFCCC system, it also made it possible that another big elephant in the room, that is, in which category do countries fall? This question was avoided, and we were able to show that we can make pragmatic progress. And I am very hopeful that other countries will join as well. And the topic of financing will be a major topic for the next COP. So we will also need to make sure that we are not being excessively ambitious, but that we get a reasonable start now.
Hello, Minister. My name is Matias Brotero. I'm a journalist for CNN Brazil. Last week, President Lula was with Chancellor Scholz, and Germany announced 100 million euros worth of finance regarding environmental projects. And you have a meeting right now about these projects, specifically the new Brazilian-German cooperation in the Cerrado Amazon interference basin. This amount, the 100 million euros, does this involve this project in the Cerrado Amazon basin, or is it a different project? And what can we expect about this project regarding the Amazon basin? What is this project about? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for asking this question, because this is a perfect bridge that I have to leave really on time, because otherwise I cannot have this important discussion with the minister from Brazil for environment. So yes, this money is also for these kind of projects. However, now it's not the moment to just list all the projects. The important thing, and this is why it was also so important for the Chancellor to present it here together with the Brazilian president, is again of making very clear, this is not a European country telling a Latin American country what to do. Rather, it is to see how we can find solutions together which are just. Because what we had also in the Mercosur discussions, I would say questions, or in the end complaints of saying, well, you got rid of all your forests like 100, 150 years ago, and now you are telling us what to do with our forest. Even though, and I was there a couple of months ago, we have now a perfect screening for the Amazonas protection scheme. And these were kind of hurdles in the past because of prejudices, fears, I would say also from EU side language, which sounded really like we are telling you. We have learned a lot. We have learned that we can not only solve this climate crisis only together, but that we can combine climate protection and economic growth. And this is also for these kind of forest projects, which sounds like environmental project, but making clear that the sustainability of the forest is also in its economic interest, and that we can have incentives in a trade agreement for products out of the forests which are being grown sustainable, is, I believe, an incredible chance, also compared to other trade negotiations where the forest is being left aside, to underline that it's not economic growth, wealth, or climate protection and sustainability, but if you do it good, you can combine it together. And therefore, we are trying everything to find together a trade agreement which is in the economic, but especially also sustainable climate and climate just interest of the countries, and making clear that nature protection projects like the 100 million fund go hand in hand together. Thank you.
Welcome to the German Climate Pavilion at COP28 in Dubai. Ambitious, just, together.